Welcome back. We are in the kitchen again today for, you guessed it, more canning videos.
So today we are actually going to be rendering some lard. This is from the pig that we processed earlier this year, and this is all we have left of that pig. And we've just been waiting to render it. And another thing we are doing today that we're very excited about is making zucchini bread in a can. So super cool. We haven't done that before. We have frozen it in the past, and we have also dehydrated zucchini. But for us, I think that canning it seems the most economical. So we're very excited for that recipe, and we are going to get started.
All right, so the first thing we're going to get started is the lard, since this is going to take the longest.
This lard is primarily leaf lard, which is fat that comes around the pig's kidneys. And usually when you process a pig, you'll get a lot of fat. You'll also get it off their backs. But because we skinned the pig, we lost a lot of the fat on it. So we mainly have just the leaf lard, which is actually some of the best lard you can get off of a pig. And what I mean by that is it's usually the lard that has the least amount of flavor. It's just a really pure, clean fat. So when we render it, we'll get a really nice white lard that will be great for anything from pies to tortillas to any sort of crust or anything like that, even biscuits too. So when rendering lard, it's always nice to have a heavy bottom pan, some sort of cast iron skillet. We're going to use our Dutch oven because it has high sides, and you will have lots of oil or fat splattering outside. It can be quite messy. So if you can do it outside, go ahead and do it outside, but we're going to be doing it in here today on our propane stove. So what Eric is working on is cutting up the lard. He's getting it cut up into small chunks, which is very crucial to when you're making or rendering lard. If you have a meat grinder, that's a great way to do it. We used to do that in the past when we were processing larger volumes, but because this is such a small amount, we're just going to chop it up. And the reason you want it smaller is because it will actually melt down that much faster for you. This whole process will take a good 3 hours to get the lard ready to be canned.
So we never used to really cook with a lot of lard until we started raising our own pigs, and we realized, how awesome and versatile this stuff actually is, and probably our main reason that we like to use this stuff and go through the hassle of processing it is that this stuff, once we get it in a can, is going to last us a long time without any refrigeration at all. Okay, so we got the pig fat all chopped up into small pieces, and it's ready to go on the stove.
What Eric's going to do is we're going to heat the pig fat up at a medium level right now. That's crucial when you're first heating it up. You don't want to just crank it because you can burn it, and that's essential to getting a really clean flavored lard at the end. You don't want to have it go really high at the beginning. So we're just going to kind of watch it, wait till we see some melting, and then we can give it a little stir and let some of that fat break down a little bit more in there. So I have this lard on low. I turned it down a little bit. It started to make a sound like it was cooking, and I didn't want it getting too hot. And what you can do is two things. These are pretty big chunks, so if you have all day to render this, go ahead and do it that big, but otherwise I do recommend getting out the grinder or chopping it up a little bit smaller. We're going to be here all day, so that's okay, but it does go quicker the smaller the pieces are. And I also recommend, if you're new to rendering lard, that it's not a bad idea to just put a little bit in at a time and make sure you get that first melted, and then you can keep adding the lard in on top of that. And again, that's just to give you kind of this safe zone where you're not going to be burning the fat on the bottom. That's crucial for not getting a really cooked pig smell, lard at the end. So maybe you've never even heard of rendering lard. Why would you want to render lard? Rendering lard is getting rid of the impurities in there, getting rid of the meat, getting rid of the water. That's all going to be cooked out and boiled out. So we are left with just pure fat. And that is what is going to be the key to storing it for so long. It'll store for years that way. It won't, if it has any sort of meat or water in it, it will actually go rancid. I'm going to keep stirring this and just keep really close eyes on it until it gets to the point where more of the lard is broken down and we are starting to end up with some of the fat in the Dutch oven. Okay, now that we have a good ½ inch or so of liquid on the bottom, we are safe to start our zucchini bread. And we're just going to keep an eye on this and keep it on a lower heat and keep stirring it. And again, this process is going to take several hours, so it is well worth it in the end though. So we are going to be making a zucchini bread that we're going to be canning in mason jars. And the first step is to get the zucchini shredded. We have a yellow and a green variety that kind of ballooned up. It looks a little funny. But these are just some extra ones we had. We did not do very well with zucchini this year, but this is going to make a good amount of bread for us for winter.
So Ariel's going to be chopping the tops and the bottoms off of these, and I'm going to get them all shredded.
We're using a total of 9 zucchinis, but they're a little mismatch shaped. So I would say if you're using a standard zucchini, maybe 7 to 8, zucchinis that you get at the grocery store. Eric finished getting the zucchini shredded. We measured it out and we have 12 cups of zucchini. I did split it up into 2 bowls because I don't think that this big bowl is going to be big enough. I'm going to include the inspiration for this recipe in the description. It is someone else's recipe, but we are actually changing up quite a bit and using lots of different ingredients. So what we first need to get started with is adding our oil and sugar to our bowl here. I'm going to be adding 4 cups of oil in total with 8 cups of sugar. First thing I'm going to start with is 1 cup of melted butter. It's not hot, but we did melt it. You can use softened butter, of course, too. And then I'm going to use 2 cups of coconut oil. Generally, Eric and I like to use coconut oil instead of other oils that are recommended in recipes, but it can lend a pretty strong flavor, especially if you're using it in large amounts. So that is why we are using some different oils. The last oil I'm going to be including in this recipe is 1 cup of olive oil. Same thing goes for the olive oil. We ended up adding just a tiny bit less because it does also have a pretty strong flavor. So we opted to lessen the sugar. We just are going to be putting in 6 cups instead of the 8 that I mentioned before. Now I'm going to go ahead and get the oil and the sugar all mixed up in here. The next step is to add 4 teaspoons of vanilla, and then we're going to want to add our eggs. We have 8 eggs, and we're going to be also adding some applesauce in and 1 mashed banana. Now that I have the eggs mixed in, I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of applesauce and a banana. So I went ahead and mixed that batter with the zucchini shreds, and I am going to get our dry ingredients mixed up in this bowl. It is a lot of flour, so I'm going to be starting with just some of the ingredients in here. I'm going to put them in the bowls, and then I will be adding the rest of the flour into the bowls directly. First up, I'm going to start with salt, and we need 2 teaspoons of salt for this recipe. And we need 4 teaspoons of baking powder and baking soda. I'm going to add 4 teaspoons of cinnamon now. Now I'm going to add cacao powder, and this is just chocolate powder. It adds a really good flavor when you are baking, and we're doing about 3 teaspoons. Now that I've got this all mixed up, I'm going to add flour. I need 12 cups. I'm probably going to fit 6 in here for now, and then I'll do what I said where I'll add the rest of the flour into each bowl. And I'm measuring out 3 cups, or a little over 3 cups for each bowl. So I'm going to add just 2 more cups of flour to this instead of 3. And the recipe that we're following does use water, but we opted not to because our zucchini was pretty wet. It had a lot of moisture in it to begin with, and in general, when we make zucchini bread, I don't use water. So that is the consistency we are looking for. I'm going to chop up some almonds now to add to this, and then I'm also going to be adding probably a 1/4 cup of chocolate chips that I have left too. So now that I have these chopped almonds ready, I'm going to put half of them in each bowl, and I believe it's about a cup of chopped almonds. And then we're going to add these chocolate chips. And then go ahead and get that mixed up. And then the next step is to get the jars ready. So I went ahead and combined both of those mixing bowls into one, and we have our jars ready. We've done some math, and I think we're going to make quite a bit. I think it's going to be 32 of these pint-sized jars. Originally we were thinking we could do quarts, but then I realized that quarts have a neck, and I don't think that'll work for the bread once it cooks and once we try to get it out later when we want to eat it. So we are going to go with pints since that seems what most everyone does. We have our oven on at 325 degrees, and I went ahead and sterilized these with hot water and some soap, and then I went in and put some coconut oil to help the bread not stick. So we're going to go ahead and get them filled up, and we're going for about halfway full. Okay, we've got these filled up. I did do them a little bit over halfway. I think that'll be okay. And I'm not quite sure how long they're gonna take. We're just gonna kind of keep an eye on them and check them and see when they are ready. So I'm gonna get them in the oven now. So while those are in the oven, I was gonna give an update on the lard that we are rendering. You can tell there's a lot more liquid now, and you are going to end up with 2 parts of this. So what's happening with the bubbles is that's the water that's coming off, and then we're gonna end up with cracklings, which is this part on top that will not break down, and then you'll end up with the lard, which is the liquid. So we still have about 2.5 hours left on this, and I will show you guys what it looks like once more of this is broken down. The lard has been going for about 2 hours total now, and we are at the point where we're gonna be taking out these cracklings. And generally, if you grind up the fat, you will actually get a little more at the end of the day. So I do recommend that option if you can do that. We're ending up with some big cracklings here. And I'm going to drain them out. You know they're done once they're crispy like that. You're not going to get much more out of them. And these guys are super tasty. It's basically just fried pork skin, so you can imagine how they would taste. And we do usually set them aside. This is a lot, so I don't know if we'll actually be eating all of this. Now that I've finished getting those out, we are actually going to strain this liquid once it's done. It's not quite done, and you'll know it's done once it stops having little bubbles. And I don't even see any little bubbles right now. If you come in close, you can see there's no bubbles at all besides just the boiling or simmering that's going on. And so that's a good sign. That means that it probably is done. I'll probably let it go for a little bit longer just to make sure. But if you do still see bubbles, that means that there's still water in that lard. And you don't want that again because that'll make your lard go rancid. So I'm going to get back to you guys once we get this strained.
In the meantime, our zucchini bread is done. I'm going to start pulling them out one by one.
And what I'm going to do is just wipe the rim, make sure it's clean. And then I'm going to put a rinsed lid and band on here.
And the reason we're pulling these out one at a time is to get a good seal on these. They need to be nice and hot when we put our lids on. So it looks like we had 1, maybe 2 in there that it went a little over the top, so I'm just going to cut that off.
Okay, so those are incredibly hot, but we've got them put aside now, so we're going to get started on our next batch. And I don't remember how long they cooked for, 50 minutes?
45 minutes.
So they cooked for 45 minutes, and we just tested them with a skewer to know when they were done or not. Eric and I went ahead and got another batch of 9 in the oven, and in the meantime, these ones have popped down, so that's how we know that they are sealed and ready to be put away. Obviously not yet, they're still very warm, but we're pretty excited about them. They look really good. I'll show you a close-up, but they look like bread, and we tasted some that we had to cut off, and it was really tasty. While that second batch is in the oven, I'm going to strain the lard and get that put away in cans as well. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this and strain it through some muslin cloth and then a strainer and into a bowl. So those are more of the cracklings, and then you end up with just pure lard down there. My guess is that'll make maybe 3 pint-sized jars, so not very much at all, but I will get that put in those jars now once I get them cleaned. And it is also important to do it while it's hot, kind of like the zucchini bread, because we're counting on that to make a seal, and it will store longer that way. So we've got our jars ready, and I'm just going to pour this in. And it does have that amber color to it, but once it hardens, it will actually turn a whiter color. And I will let them cool, and I will show you guys what they look like once they're cool. We're back to filling up these jars since the second round of our zucchini bread is almost done. And I have been filling them up just slightly above the halfway mark, and that seems to be where they won't rise too much that we need to cut them off. We've also found that they cook for about 45 minutes until they're done. And I just wanted to get these done so I can tell you guys about how many that recipe makes that we did. And I believe we're coming in at 22 pints. So a little bit shy of what the recipe that I am going to include in the description says. I think that if you quadruple that recipe, you'd get 24 cans. But all in all, we're very excited for it, and it made less than we thought, but it's still a lot of cans, so something to look forward to in winter. So I have to finish up with these last 4, and then we'll be putting them in the oven, and I will show you guys tomorrow what the lard looks like and all of these breads when they're done. Alright, so it has been a few days and we were going to show you what the lard turned out like. It is a little bit darker than white lard, and that's traditionally what color it is going to be when you render it. But yesterday we were a little distracted when we were making our zucchini bread, and I let those cracklings sit in there a little too long, so we did get some of that coloring imparted in the lard. Not a big deal, it's still going to be great for cooking with, and it doesn't have a piggy odor or anything like that. If you're interested in rendering lard, it'd probably be easier to grind up those pieces a little bit smaller when you're first melting it down, and then just keep a closer eye on it so you know when it stops bubbling and it is done. Eric was going to go ahead and open up a zucchini bread so we could try it.
Okay, so yeah, this zucchini bread looks like it turned out pretty good. We're gonna pop a jar open and see if it comes out.
This one wasn't filled up all the way. Most of the ones we did, we tried to fill them up right to the rim, which is about 2/3 of batter in each jar.
And that popped right out. That came out really easily. Pretty much just looks like regular zucchini bread.
In a roll.
Alright, so this stuff is really good. It stayed nice and moist inside that can. And the coolest part about having it in a can for us is we've frozen this stuff in the past. We don't really have means of freezing it now, so these are just going to go right into the root cellar, and it's kind of like a quick snack. Just pop open a can and you got fresh zucchini bread. So we're going to finish eating the rest of this, and we will see you guys next time.